Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. In this video, I'm going to be going over the art that I worked over the course of 2 months when I was working on my other channel before I accidentally deleted it. And to start off, I'm showing you right here that I had worked on multiple things, including like cups, a salt shaker, and my mic. Skipping over a bit of practice from here, as it would take a very long time to explain, I then started working heavily on my microphone, as I had realized things that when I was drawing the cup were very hard to do because I didn't understand perspective and whatnot. And due to that, I ended up working very hard on just this alone. It took about 2 hours to draw all of this and to start like studying it. My whole point is that this was probably the first time that I was working on a perspective drawing. However, it was not using any of the perspective tricks, so it still ended up not being as good as I wanted it to. Everything you can see right now is in chicken scratch, essentially, and that is because I had to work on straight lines and whatnot. And I was not there yet. I could have just used a stabilizer, but I did not want to use a stabilizer because, well, I don't remember the exact thing. I think it was just that it can affect my art in a very specific way that I don't want it to. Stabilizers are useful to use. However, it's better to get your line work in shape before you use stabilizers, because if you could just basically draw it freehand without that much effort, then you will be able to essentially draw anything if you get good enough, and then the stabilizer will just make it easier to go over the different lines. Because if I wanted to, for instance, create a perfectly straight line, well, not perfectly straight, that makes no sense in this context. If I wanted to make a line that was bold yet not shaky like this is, then it may be a really good idea for me to use a stabilizer to essentially go around this circle right here, and then I could potentially make a near perfect circle on a different layer that's supposed to be the finishing lines, because that's a thing where you basically draw normal lines like this, and then after you got the conceptual lines done, you add the lines that go over top of the shading in after, and then you add like the shading underneath and the coloring and whatnot, and then you end up getting a really good piece. As for what I started doing after this, is I went straight into perspective, and it took me a few more drawings in order to create straight lines, like proper straight lines in quotations, because everything here is still in chicken scratch. As you could see, I drew just 2 basic boxes, experimenting with angles and stuff and point perspective. This is supposed to be like a floaty that you would see in a pool, just trying things. Didn't turn out as I wanted it to, obviously, because I'm still a noob at this, like a complete noob at this point. Not even an amateur, just a noob. Well, I guess I would be an amateur, but a complete noob. This, I was experimenting with different 2-point perspective points primarily, which is why you're going to see a lot of things. This was going to be a building right here in 3-point perspective, and it was not turning out, so I didn't end up doing it. Ended up just creating a cube with a door, and it did not turn out. Wait, no. I got that backwards. Again, it's been a very long time since I've actually drawn, and yeah. But this is what I was drawing apparently in a 3-point perspective, and I had to create the grid lines. Door did not turn out. That's fine. Not very skilled at this point. So I tried creating something to understand how overhang works and stuff like that. Then I wanted to see how much better it would be if I used purely line art, which, yeah, it does look better. However, if I just started only using the line tool, it would completely diminish the point of me practicing drawing straight lines. So I did not continue doing that. I tried drawing my mic in perspective, with the perspective point being down here, because that's where this would be pointing. It did turn out fine. Right here is a little shaky. Well, actually, I could just... Wait, why am I not using the lasso tool? Right here is a little shaky, but other than that, this looks fine in comparison to my previous mic, which didn't even have the head on it. And the reason why I didn't put the head on it originally is because of how difficult that would be for me to do at this stage. But yeah, after I got this complete, I think there wasn't much, there wasn't much more. It was just me drawing it in more different perspectives, with the points changing. I tried doing a top-down view, which turned out pretty well, honestly. Then I studied it from a completely weird angle. Basically, I was trying to experiment with looking at it from below. Looking at it from below is very hard, and I think the reason why it was very hard is because when you look at things, like, I'm gonna go to the next one, which shows something that isn't supposed to be shown yet, but when you're looking at things, how often do you actually see it from the bottom? Like, you see it from the top, you see it from the sides, but how often do you see it from the bottom? I can guarantee 99% of items that you see in real life you do not see from the bottom, so drawing something from a bottom perspective can be challenging. That's what I learned here. This up here, we could completely ignore. It's just supposed to be a pencil sharpener, if that's what that is. It is not like a helicopter or something like that, although now that I look at it, I could probably turn this into a pretty good looking helicopter. Or like a mechanical whale or something like that, I don't know. I don't think this was my first, it might have been my first perspective drawing where I just used an image. I don't know where the image went. I might have deleted it off my computer, or it could have gotten corrupted, which you will see a theme with that later on in the video. But it looks like one of those things that you would find, and I hope I put up an image of, like, it's a cloth that you would, or not even really a cloth, it doesn't even have to be a cloth, or it's like on the walls of those like Japanese old-time traditional buildings. I don't know what they're called because I'm not like culturally aware of the history of Japan. But yeah, that's what this looks like. This image is supposed to be this one up here, and the image here is a lot harder to draw than it looks like. And I'll explain why in like as few words as possible, because I went on for like 5 minutes about this. There's a perspective right here that is being drawn to a singular point approximately right here in this area, within this circular area. And because of that, when you look at the second part of the image, which is inside of the past part of right here, it's a completely different perspective. Oh boy. So not only did I have to deal with this being a completely different perspective, but this building right here, I'm going to make this smaller so I can circle it more accurately. That's too small. 5's probably good. This building right here is completely different than the building next to it perspective-wise. And what I mean by that is that this line right here does not line up. That's not a straight line right there, which means that this is angled very so slightly at a different point. That doesn't sound like it would be that difficult, but oh boy, was that difficult to represent. And because of that, I just ended up drawing over it to understand it before attempting it a few more times, which I will show right now, because this was the first attempt. I think I attempted it like 3 or 4 more times, but in this file, I only attempted it a few more times. I accidentally just made my thing microscopic. There we go. This is a second representation of it. Pretty sure I just still kept the same line perspective-wise for this building, because this was before I started experimenting with just drawing the image based off the image, using the image. But yeah, this is before I understood the perspective point. All this was before I understood exactly how perspective lines worked when it came to multiple perspectives in the image, because I did not know that existed. And because of that, I ended up limiting myself in this image quite a bit, since I wasn't just that far yet. Going on from this image though, I then started working on more abstract ideas, where it's just draw stuff from your brain, essentially trying to draw buildings using perspective, which it did not turn out very well. As you could see, like this one, I ended up just drawing part of inside of the building just to mess around with it, because I couldn't figure I couldn't figure out how to get an overhang. That's what these two were. Well, three probably, actually. Yeah, these three were doing, is I was trying to get the overhang. And I just could not figure it out. This is just before I learned how to do 3D stuff. Which, if I go to the next... If I go to the next drawings, I do eventually end up figuring that out, but I'll talk about this here in a second, as I keep forgetting to remove it. The main thing that I was curious about is drawing stuff that is really up in your face. Like, this is supposed to be a door here, this is supposed to be a window, and then there's supposed to be a rock here, lake here, a skull around here somewhere. But I didn't get that far because I couldn't get the art to look 3D. And I know shading helps with that, but the point is that if I can't get my line work to look semi-3D, then when I add shading and coloring, it's not going to pop out correctly. It's going to be misaligned in some way, or something's going to be off slightly. So that's what all of this has been working on, is just getting my line work to look accurate. Next was this drawing of... No. Next was the drawing of Ameza, I think it is, Black Sea City. And this is just part of the city, obviously, but the main thing that I worked on was drawing the two buildings right here. As if you look at these two buildings, they have a lot of 3D practice potential, because right here is more outwards than underneath of the entire area, which means that I could essentially practice on trying to make it not look flat, which I succeeded in doing after like 3 or 4 attempts on the same layer. So essentially what I did is that whenever something didn't look right, I erased it and then redrew it, and then I erased it and redrew it, until I had finally gotten the 3D look that I was looking for. The point of which I actually had a eureka moment, which I can't say that word for some reason, is right here, as this is where I first understood how the 2-point perspective 3D look applied to the actual image. As if I'd like follow this line all the way out, it would be like right about here, or at least there would be, I could represent the line that it connects to as right here, as the actual line would probably be all the way over here. However, because of that, because of me understanding how that affects the actual drawing and where and when the points of perspective were, that allowed me to understand that I was getting good enough at art to the point where I should start drawing random objects. And since I came back to drawing random objects, I started working on shading and grayscale, as once when your line art starts getting good enough, you could essentially just start drawing things and trying different shading tones and stuff on them, experimenting with them, which is different than learning how light affects things in a very slight way, because I could just redraw an image a million times, but if I were to draw an abstract image from memory, then I likely would not get the shading right. So it's something that I'll have to work on at some point. The next one after that is actually the flashlight, which I don't have the image, just like I don't have the image for the speaker because I deleted it probably for my downloads. A very hard part was getting the lines to be parallel properly with the lines down here. And you could see that, especially when you start looking at like the lines that you can't see that would be parallel. Like this line does not match up with this line right here. In fact, there's more, and the reason why there's more lines here is because I figured that it wouldn't change that much if I just made it slightly bigger, because I was struggling with figuring out how to draw I think it's a hexagon. It's either a hexagon or a sexagon, and I just couldn't fathom drawing it properly. It's slightly wonky, but it should be fine for now, or at least that's how I feel. As I sent this to a family group chat, and they thought it was real for a second until they actually looked at it. The final thing after that, or was that the final thing? I might have skipped one. Oh, I did skip one. I skipped the hammer. Yeah, the hammer didn't turn out so well because I didn't have the same thing that I had for the the speaker right here. I didn't have as much stuff going on for it. And what I mean by that is that if you look at it, if you stop and think about what color are the heads of hammers, they are silver. And because they are silver, that made this very difficult to draw since I didn't have as much tone difference between the shading. And then on top of that, this was kind of a weird angle that it was at. And it was a more round object, which is harder to draw than a box, as this was just a box essentially. So despite this looking more complex, it actually took around the same amount of time as this hammer for an attempt, because I actually did 2 attempts on the speaker than I did on the hammer. Next is this drawing, and I drew this like a few days ago, which you probably saw for the first video's thumbnail. Essentially what it is that it's a representation of this channel for the first video, because I didn't want to make the first video come out terrible. So this first book right here, this book represents strategy and self-learning, which is why there's a pencil, as that's going to be a huge theme of this channel since everything's going to be self-taught. The second one is carpentry and art. I honestly got tired of drawing for the first video, since it was only 60 seconds long. I was like, you know what? I'm just going to draw 2 more things after I drew the initial 3, because initially it was just 3. It was just the book, the art piece right here, and then the laptop. But yeah, the reason why the art piece is colored and everything else isn't is because I didn't know how to represent art without adding colors in an easy way, so I kind of was forced to color it in. Otherwise this would be all black and white, if I'm going to be honest. However, that does actually make this represent itself a lot better, as art usually has a lot of colors and stuff like that. You're thinking about details and stuff like that with art specifically, so that you can make something look nice. The computer obviously represents programming, and the gear represents mechanical engineering. And that's it for this video. If you enjoyed this video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. And until next time, peace out.